Speaking from the perspective of the father in the parable of the prodigal son offers a profound insight into unwavering faith and hope. The father's journey is one of patience and belief, representing the love that persists even in the darkest times. While the world may have labeled his son as lost or beyond redemption, the father held on to the belief that reconciliation was possible. His faith wasn't passive. It was an active waiting, a steadfast assurance that love could triumph over despair. Luke 15th chapter, beginning with the 11th verse, gives us insight into the story between a father, his prodigal son, and older son. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. We often speak on that perspective of the prodigal son coming back home. And we talk about the father who welcomed him with open arms. But we don't take the time to really think what that father was probably enduring, praying for his son. believing that God would bring him back home. Some of us may be in that very position today. Will you faithfully wait on God? Faithful waiting. The power of hope in the face of despair. Yes, that's what that father was enduring. Faithful waiting. The power of hope in the face of despair. When recounting the story of the prodigal son, we often focus on the perspective of the wayward son, an entitled young man demanding his inheritance before his father's time. Inheritance usually invokes thoughts of wills and the distribution of assets among heirs. Yet, the prodigal son story unveils a deeper narrative, one that's frequently overlooked. The father in this parable could have chosen to respond with bitterness. He could have declared, "I'm still alive, and you shall receive nothing until I'm gone." Or chastise his son for his selfishness and entitlement, refusing to give him a dime. Instead, he mirrors the loving, compassionate nature of God the Father, who blesses us abundantly even when we feel undeserving. This tale transcends mere redemption. It's a testament to a father's unwavering faith in God, believing that his wayward son would one day return, not in a casket, but alive and restored. Some of you may relate deeply to this story. You might have a prodigal child, grandchild, sibling, or spouse whose reckless lifestyle fills your nights with worry. You lie awake, concerned for their safety, pondering their choices. Initially, this father likely succumbed to fear and anxiety, allowing the enemy to rob him of his peace, hope, and faith. See, that's what the enemy does: steal, kill, and destroy. However, as he began to reflect on God's faithfulness and the power of fervent prayer, he transformed his sorrow into steadfast faith. He spoke of things that were not yet visible as though they already existed, standing firmly on God's promises. He walked by faith, not by sight, believing that his son would return, perhaps a little broken, but alive. God desires for each of us to look beyond our pain and strive toward his promises. Walking by faith is the only way to please him. And though we may not grasp everything, we can trust him in every circumstance. We reclaim the authority God has granted us to tread upon serpents, affirming that despite appearances, God is faithful. The story of the prodigal son teaches us to relinquish our perceived rights, allowing God to reveal himself through our loved ones. It's a declaration. I may not understand, but Lord, I will trust you. We might not track the reasons behind our loved ones' choices, but we refuse to curse what God has blessed. Even when they seem lost in messiness, we must see our seeds as blessed. The enemy seeks to distract us, and these distractions can lead us to utter curses over our loved ones. We must transform our conversations, standing firm on God's promises. It may feel bleak, and some of you may have endured the fire for quite some time, but despite the flames, you remain untouched, not a hair singed, and you don't smell like smoke. God calls us to shift our focus from our current circumstances to his promises. Just as the prodigal son faced the repercussions of his choices, he also found time for reflection. Some of our loved ones may need to confront their own struggles, but God will refine them through it all. Don't doubt God's hand in their lives. Faith doesn't mean tears won't fall. It doesn't guarantee that everything will stand with you, that everyone will stand with you, nor that you won't face ridicule for holding on to hope. How often have we seen our negative words manifest because we've been conditioned to believe only what we see? I can only imagine the fervent prayers that Father whispered for his son, yearning to see him return. I believe he stood outside daily, rain or shine, envisioning the moment his son will walk through the door. Eventually, that day came, and his heart overflowed with joy at the sight of his son returning. Today, let me remind you of God's faithfulness. It's not always as it seems. God is greater than any challenge we face, any demon or dilemma. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. Stop cursing your seed based on what you see. Stop limiting God and refuse to surrender your loved ones to despair. Remember, faith without works is dead. You must actively work your faith, because there will be voices urging you to give up. Sometimes that enemy resides within the doubts we harbor. This is faithful waiting, not doubtful waiting. When you hope in the Lord, you cultivate resilience and hope in the face of despair. God's word is rich with promises. Will you allow your faith to be stirred by believing in those promises? Cling to 2 or 3 of them, holding on with unwavering faith. Do not crumble in your waiting. Faithful waiting demands perseverance. Do not succumb to despair. It's perfectly acceptable to keep looking out the window for your miracle. The father of the prodigal son welcomed his boy home with open arms, having faithfully waited for his return. We cannot know how long he stood at that window, but his faithful waiting ultimately bore fruit. You may encounter those who try to dissuade you from believing, and perhaps other family members may resent your unwavering hope, feeling jealousy at the reception your loved one receives upon return. Trust God in every season. Do not give up. Never lose hope. Maintain your faith in a God who will always be with you, never failing or forsaking you. Faithful waiting.